Hello, my name's Richard Felix and I'm going to take you on a ghostly tour of South Wales. South Wales, land of myths, legends, the original British, the Celts, druids, dragons, magic, and of course ghosts. What better place to start this tour than here at Cardiff Castle? So many ghost stories that we could take up the whole video just at this place. But of course we haven't got time for that. But we have various stories to tell you. This place, as we see it now, was actually built for the second Marquis of Bute. He died here in 1848 in a room just at the back of the library, and his ghost has been seen on many occasions walking through the fireplace of the library and heading towards the room where he died. There's also the ghost of a lady dressed in a cream dress that wanders around the grounds and also in the buildings. Her name is Sarah. She is usually a malevolent ghost, an angry ghost. But if you know her name and you call her Sarah, then she calms down. This is the 12th century castle keep. It was originally built of wood, and this is where Robert, Duke of Normandy, eldest son of William I, William the Conqueror, was imprisoned for 8 years. And standing on the other side of the moat, on a dark, lonely, windy night, is often seen a lady standing at the other side of the drawbridge and waving forlornly and looking up at this castle keep. It's believed that she is waving to Duke Robert. His ghost has also been seen wandering around inside this place where he was kept for over 8 years. He was in fact imprisoned in Wales for over 28 years. But of course, it's impossible to tell whether it's really him or not that's here. And how he could see that lady, no one knows. Because when he arrived at this castle, his eyes were put out and he was blinded. And they say that his ghost still wanders to this day around this old castle keep. I'm standing on the B4233 just outside Monmouth, and here in 1850 was a very serious road accident. But it was a road accident concerning a coach and four. It was thundering down Anchor Hill in a thunderstorm, and the coachman lost it. He managed to get round the first bend, but the second bend here, it went onto two wheels and slewed over and smashed into this wall. 4 horses with legs flailing as the coach tumbled over into the field. There were 5 passengers on board and 3 of them were killed. And legend has it that on dark, stormy nights, when the atmosphere is the same, and sometimes actually on that anniversary, a reconstruction is seen here, a vague reconstruction of a coach thundering down here, hitting the wall, turning over, and when it smashes into tiny pieces of wood, it just disappears completely from view. Now I've been wandering around looking for the exact spot, and I went up to the top of Anchor Hill to a farmhouse, and the gentleman said, "Where did you get that story from?" And I said, "Well, we looked it up on the internet and it's in various ghost books." And he said, "Well, I know the gentleman that wrote the original story in the 1960s. Took the phone out, dialed the gentleman, and I spoke to him. His name was Stephen Clark, and he told me the whole story exactly as I've just told to you, but I actually got it almost from the horse's mouth. This is the graveyard in Llangyafol Crocorni in Monmouthshire. Here, the graves of the Price family. And this particular one here, the grave of Fanny Price, the beloved wife of Henry. Henry Price was the landlord of the legendary Skirrid Inn. And that's why I'm here in this village to tell of the many ghost stories of that magnificent old inn. Over here, in front of me, the Skirrid Mountain, the Holy Mountain, mountain of myths and legend. It's believed that a large fissure occurred after a bolt of lightning hit it on the day of the crucifixion. But we're now off to the pub, the local pub of this village, to find many, many ghosts. So why not come with me to Wales's oldest inn? And I've arrived outside the Skirrid Inn. Magnificent old stone Welsh building. Goes back probably to the 12th century. The oldest inn in Wales. And to prove it, it actually says it there. And the sign, of course, up there showing the Holy Mountain, the Skirrid Mountain, with the bolt of lightning causing the fissure on the day of the crucifixion. But I'm going in to this fantastic old inn. It's got an absolute wealth of ghost stories. The beer's excellent, and so is the food. So why not come and join me? And here I am inside the Skirrid Inn. Darryl, how are you?
Hi, fine.
Long time no see. Must be at least, what, 5 weeks?
At least.
Since Most Haunted came and took you over?
It is.
Literally?
It is.
Yeah, anything happened since?
Where do you start?
Exactly.
Bright lights,
Right.
tables moving, doors opening, devil's cup emptying.
Just the same, every night?
Every night. Sometimes more than often. Yeah.
Really? And of course you've just told me that you actually now see
the
orbs without a camera.
Without any camera at all, I can actually point them out and you can take a photograph and people can actually see them.
That is amazing.
But having said that, we've had people who can see them as well.
Really? Wow.
We had one lady on Friday night who wouldn't even go into the bathroom upstairs. Toilet rolls and rolling, that not sort of unravelling but spinning all night and appearing to be 3 times the size in the morning.
And that's not because they've been dipped in the toilet or anything like that? Crikey. And the Devil's Cup, I mean, you that goes back to sort of folklore time, doesn't it?
Well, it goes back as far as William Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
You've got Puck,
Yeah.
the mischievous sprite, but in Wales it's actually spelt slightly different. It's P-W-C-K.
Right.
So obviously Wordsworth just changed the W to the U,
Yeah.
Where it goes. So
And you fill that cup. I know you do. I've seen you do it.
Every evening at around about 11:30, fill the cup. Sometimes it's gone down an inch, other times it's gone down to half full. So we fill that cup every night.
And it's there above the fireplace now.
Yeah.
Can we go and have a look?
Yeah, sure.
Go on then. Excuse me, ladies. Do you mind if I just? I won't bother you for long.
And don't tip it.
I won't tip it. That's it. And
That's
now,
gone down since
go on.
last night.
Tell me, you filled that,
I filled that to the top last night,
right?
and that's gone down by what? 2 inches?
Yeah. And I've seen you do it when we were here, and I was here
we've
next
seen it
morning,
when it
and
was
I've
out.
seen it exactly the same as that. So he had a drink last night,
Somebody did, and it wasn't me.
and you were the last one.
I was the last one in.
So you know full well no one else comes in and tips it out, or
11:30 I filled that last night.
so it must be the devil.
Or somebody.
Smells a bit.
Oh yes, yes.
Right, can we
I don't think you can get up that far.
have a wander around and have a look at some of the wonders of the building? Including the hanging post, of course,
Right.
and into the dining room, which you've done up a little bit since we were last
We
here.
have, yeah. We've stripped all the panelling off, which obviously now looks a lot better. It's been painted over in black paint.
Doesn't it just?
Strip that off.
Yeah.
So reputably from one of Her Majesty's ships.
That's the panelling from
Yeah.
perhaps the cabin or something like that of what was the ship called? Any ideas?
HMS Robinson.
Wow, you even...
So they say.
Yeah. And
No proof to that.
no, of course not. But I mean, obviously ghostly goings on in here as well.
Yeah, we have plates rolling around the top of the panelling.
Yeah.
People have been having their Sunday luncheon plates have apparently leapt off onto the floor.
Crikey.
And one or two people do say that they feel seasick when they're in here.
Well, again, it's obviously due to the fact
Due to
that,
the
that
power,
yeah, and of course the presence of either a sea captain or a naval officer has been sort of picked up in here
Has
as
been
well.
seen, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a cat.
Really?
Yeah.
Ship's cat.
Ship's cat. A lot of people say, I like your cat. Well, we don't have a cat, so
Amazing.
strange.
Right, and of course you've found a fireplace.
Found the original fireplace in the back there.
Yeah.
Which
That's quite exciting when you start pulling away things and finding things like that.
Yeah, we never found any treasure or anything like that, which was
That's a shame.
supposed to be buried up there, but we never found anything like that.
Never mind.
Unfortunately. But
Yeah, but what you have got is treasure. Well, I think you've got treasure through here with this incredible staircase and the hanging beam. So let's go and have a look. And here it is.
Yeah.
Quite amazing. I mean, basically, this was, of course, used as courts, prison.
Yeah, the sizes for Monmouthshire,
Yeah,
or as it was then, I think Gwent, wasn't it then?
yeah,
But that's the original hanging beam.
and executions. And this is it. And
That's the one.
I tell you something, it's quite amazing. I mean, obviously here, hangman's rope, not original, but of the exact size
Yes.
of a hangman's
We've
rope.
had to stick an extra knot in it because people keep putting their heads in it.
That's the trouble. Drunks might just go and do something awful. But I mean, story is that it's possible that this was actually once higher.
Yes. So you got the drop from the staircase.
Yeah,
But if we look from the other side, you can actually see the scorch marks on the beam.
exactly. And in fact, here, up there, are the actual grooves in the beam. And I have actually, with this rope, put that rope on these marks, and they do fit exactly. And so, in other words, as the rope was swinging backwards and forwards with a body on it, that's what's scored those beams like that. And of course, there are stories of the sound of the rope actually swinging backwards and forwards and creaking on that
Right, yeah.
beam.
Yeah, that's right.
Ghostly goings on.
You get a lot
Here?
of temperature drops in the corner of the stairs,
Really?
as though somebody's actually stood in the staircase.
Yeah.
And people have commented that they've passed people on the stairs, but there's been nobody there, or somebody's had the back of the head felt,
Yeah.
or coldness down the back of the neck.
Gosh.
So it's quite eerie. You can sit on the staircase some evenings and just sit and watch the orbs coming through the doors.
Gosh, a helmeted figure's been seen as well.
There is.
Yeah, wandering around.
Probably something to do with the uprising or something like that,
Yeah.
when they're calling the troops to arms.
Yes, of course. And then onwards up the staircase, and there's the original courtroom
Yeah, there is.
still here,
Yeah.
which of course you now use as bedrooms, and of course are available to the public.
Oh yeah, if they want to stay the night, or if they dare stay the night.
Exactly.
Some people have fled in the early hours of the morning.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Fantastic old four-poster bed. And of course this is part of the courtroom. This is the actual bit where the trial's
This
probably...
is the actual part where the trial was. The wall probably wasn't there. At the back is probably just a curtain across to make one big room
Yeah.
right through. But this part would be used as the court, and the other part would have been used as the judge's retiring chamber.
Yeah, the chambers, withdrawing
Yeah.
room. Yeah. And it's reputed, of course, that Judge Jeffreys actually presided
Yes.
over the courts
Yeah.
here. Can be mistaken, of course, we're in Monmouthshire,
Yeah,
and of course it was the Duke of Monmouth's rising,
that's right.
but of course that was down in Somerset.
Yes.
But of course they reckon that he actually, for want of a better word, practised here before the risings.
Apparently 180 people were hung.
Here.
Yes.
That's an awful lot of people, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And of course most of them would have been sentenced to actually hang here
Yes.
in this room.
So they actually went from here and were taken down into the cell,
And
which is
yeah,
now a bathroom.
yeah, and that through that doorway there is where the prisoners, the condemned, would actually be taken by the guards down here into this little room here, and spent their last night.
Last night, while everybody else was downstairs in the alehouse having a jolly good time.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, of course, we're talking rough justice. We're talking of if you were condemned, you would probably be hanged the next day.
Yes.
Unless it was Sunday. And then you'd actually have an extra day, and that was all. But literally the next day, in here one day, the next morning, 8 o'clock or whatever it was, out through the door, off the staircase, dangling, swinging, choking, writhing, vomiting, taking anything up to a quarter of an hour to die of slow strangulation.
Yeah.
So there's no wonder that there are so many ghosts.
Cut them down and leave them lying on the flag at the bottom of the stairs.
Yes, of course.
And then cart them out the back door and then, thrown onto a truck and away you went.
And away you went. Yeah. Buried, often in unconsecrated ground. If you were a murderer, you could well have been gibbeted. That's hung up in a metal cage. Yeah. Or, of course, publicly dissected. Probably at the Shire Hall in Monmouth. Anything rather than giving you a decent burial.
Yeah.
So that's really, I think, one of the reasons why there's probably so many tormented souls still lingering around the Skirrid.
And apparently we've got 2 characters still residing in the courtroom.
Oh, really?
Hovering about. One could be the hanging judge. You just
of course, yes,
and
indeed.
There is probably the hangman.
Yeah,
because they have 2 spirits are seen. One sitting, one standing just behind to one side. Could be the hangman and the judge.
Crikey. Can we get round to the doorway, to the actual entrance to the condemned cell?
Yeah.
All right, let's go and have a look around there. Now, there is also story, of course, of the ghost of a lady that's been seen wandering around the place. And that's believed to be, is that right, Fanny Price?
It's a lady called Fanny Price.
Yeah.
Believed to have died, well, there are 2 stories. One is that she died of consumption.
Yeah.
In bedroom number 3, which is a smaller room.
Yeah.
People have woken up in the morning and felt somebody sat on the end of the bed.
That's this
one here.
This actual bedroom here?
Yeah.
Bedroom number 3, right. And she died in there?
She died. Or somebody died. They believe it was Fanny Price.
Right.
But there is also a story of a lady who died or perished in the woods, which are called White Lady Woods.
Oh, yes.
Apparently she perished one evening after having a domestic, fled from Lanvey Angle Court, out into the woods, and they found her next morning frozen to a tree.
Gosh.
Now there is a connection with the Skirrid and Lanvey Angle Court via a tunnel, which has since been passed through by the introduction of the A465.
Oh, what a shame.
Which cut right through it, and they did actually find it.
Really?
And quick look, and I think they bricked it up or filled it in. So possibly that lady from here was having a bit of a fling with the guy over at the court, using the passageway.
Of course, as you would.
Got caught and ran from the...
and perished in the woods.
From the house. So there's 2 stories, because one is that it could be Fanny Price that's the same person.
And of course, Fanny Price was the wife of the landlord, Henry Price.
Yes.
And of course, they're all buried
in the churchyard.
Down in the churchyard, where we've been already, and her ghost's also said to wander the churchyard, and from there
so you
back
can
to
actually
here.
drive into the village on a foggy night, and you can see somebody stood in your headlamps, and as you get closer, they just fade and disappear.
And that's probably the ghost of Fanny Price.
You never know.
Condemned cell?
Yeah.
Right. Has anything happened to you, Darryl, since you've been here?
Oh.
Because you've not been here very long, have you?
No, we've been here since December the 9th.
Yeah.
The first thing that actually happened was we were showing somebody around as we're doing now. We took them into the courtroom, and he loved the room, loved the bathroom, didn't like the ceiling.
Oh, yes.
The ceiling has been artexed.
Correct, I noticed that, yeah.
Thing. He did nothing but moan about the ceiling. We came out,
not being contemporary to the rest of the building.
Yeah. Big chap had to bend down to get through the door. Stood out here. Before this little mirror went on there, we had a vase on there, and the vase leapt off there and landed at our feet.
Wow.
And he
was with you?
He was with us, and that's the first sighting that we had of anything, mainly because he was moaning about the ceiling. His friend, however, never said a word. But the vase came off the wall, landed at roughly where our feet are now, and he took 3 strides and was down the stairs.
And didn't stay?
It wasn't very long before he left. He had a brandy before he went to
I think he did.
Yes.
Crikey.
Yeah, so that was the first one.
Yeah.
The second one was we've had a £10 note travel the full length of the bar,
Yeah.
which when it got to the end of the bar, it carried on going for 2 or 3 feet and then dropped, but it had change on top of it.
But it went off the bar and levitated, continued.
Yeah, and then dropped.
You saw that as well, didn't you?
That, yeah. Well, not just me, unfortunately. There was 8 other people who witnessed it.
Have you taken down their written statements?
Well, one of them has done it on camera, I think, hasn't he?
Crikey.
The other is the cell door, which opens and shuts.
Oh yeah, shall we go down and have a look at this? Because this is really quite something. When you think this is obviously, I presume, the original door. I mean, it looks extremely old, as does the rest.
Yeah.
And little door here, and in here, just opens like that, I presume.
Yeah.
And of course, this is only a tiny part of the actual condemned cell.
Yeah. We
where
now
they
use
were
it as
kept.
boil house and storeroom, but
Yeah.
it is on the other side. It's a false wall. It's the other side of the bathroom.
Yeah.
So the prisoners would have spent the night in there. They bring them out onto the staircase.
Over here.
Over you go.
And over you go.
Yeah.
And of course, they've heard footsteps on the stairs. As I say, they've heard the noise of
Lights
the
on
rope.
stairs, swinging ropes.
Yeah. And I mean, you and I actually, we did a vigil here. Yeah. We were sat on this staircase. I was sat here. You were sat there, and twice
The door opened.
that door opened. That's a bit better. I'm much refreshed after that. What a place. I mean, so many ghosts. The ghost of Fanny Price, the ghost of how many people? 182 people executed, hanged in that stairwell. The ghost of a jailer, a man also apparently stabbed himself to death in the condemned cell to avoid being hanged, and they say his ghost haunts it. The ghost of Judge Jeffreys, honestly one of the most haunted places, certainly in Wales, possibly in the country. And even another story out here. This is the original mounting block, and of course a horse would be here. You would walk up these steps to mount a horse, and they say that they see the ghost of Owen Glendower, the man of course that was fighting in the 1400s to secure Wales's future, to rid the English from Wales. He did very well. He fought for 4 years against the English, even managed to establish his own Welsh Parliament, and also started talking to the French to become allies of the French. But unfortunately it all went wrong and he had to go into hiding. Legend has it he had a magic stone which would conjure up storms and bad weather, and it could also make him invisible. And when he disappeared in 1415, some say killed by the English, but of course the Welsh said that he'd become invisible, had gone into hiding, and would not come out of hiding until the English left Wales. This is the very stone that he mounted his horse to go and fight the English, and this was also used by successive princes of Wales and kings of England. What power, what energy must be emblazoned into this very stone. I'm now at Llanwit Major in Glamorgan. This is St Dunot's Castle, a very haunted castle, haunted by Lady Stradling, an elderly lady seen wandering along the long gallery wearing high heels and a long flowing dress. She was murdered somewhere in that castle. She's not the only ghost. There's also an evil looking witch that's been seen wandering around in the armoury. And there's an incredible story about Sir Harry Stradling, who lived here. He was captured by a Breton pirate called Colin Dolphin in 1415. He was held ransom by the pirate, and the pirate wanted 2,000 crowns to release him. He couldn't afford to pay it, and he had to sell all of his land and his properties, both in Glamorgan and also in Monmouthshire. He was then released back here to his beautiful castle. A year later, his henchmen noticed a pirate ship sailing here in the bay. It was obviously coming to either raid at St Donat's or to replenish. So what did they do? They put false lights on the rocks and then lured the ship onto a sandbank down at Nash Cove. They rushed down, killed all the sailors, and brought Colin Dolphin back to the castle and put on a special trial. They sentenced him to death, a horrendous death. They took him back down to Tresillian Cave and buried him up to his neck in the sand and waited for the tide to come in. And they say that on a dark, windy night, you can still hear the ghostly screams of Colin Dolphin, screaming for mercy as the tide comes in and covers his head. I've just been round the corner to have a word with one of the locals to make sure I know how to pronounce the place. And here I am at Llancaethfawr Manor in Mid Glamorgan, or Caerphilly. Last time I was standing here on this pathway, it was snowing heavily. I was stuck here for the night and I had to go in there to do a vigil. Luckily with other people. I didn't like it. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. Lots and lots of ghostly stories to this place. This goes back to about 1537, the house does, was the home of the Pritchard family, but it stands on much earlier foundations, on medieval foundations. So why not come inside and have a look for some ghosts with me? Although nothing actually happened to me on the night, even now I'm filled with trepidation. But anyway, I'm not alone. I've got Enid with me. You, Enid, are a costumed...
I'm a costumed interpreter in Llancaeth.
Oh, right. I see.
I've been working here for the past 12 years. So.
Really? Now, unfortunately, we couldn't film you in costume.
No, sadly.
But things have happened to you, apparently, in here?
Oh, yes.
Ghostly things?
Ghostly things, yes. In fact, most of us who work in the house have had different experiences of one kind or another. But I've had a few experiences in the garden and in the manor house.
All right.
Especially on the top floor.
Really? Now, Ed was talking to me earlier, and of course he used to live here.
That's right.
And he was telling me that nothing actually ever happened to him in the house, but he actually saw a gentleman in Victorian costume with a stovepipe hat in the garden, and it ran straight down to the bottom and went straight through the wall and vanished. Says it didn't frighten him either.
This is the strange part about it. A lot of people have talked about this gentleman, a lot of people have actually seen him.
Yeah.
And no one ever seems to be actually frightened by these sort of things that happen. What can be frightening are noises, sudden noises and really loud noises.
But make you jump, in fact.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But funnily enough, ghosts themselves, when people see them, they're not usually frightened.
Not in
which is
this
strange,
house.
Isn't it?
Yes,
so, can we do a quick tour round the house?
Absolutely.
I know, having been here already, here's the kitchens, of course, and I know for a fact there's a ghost in here of a girl called Martha.
Some people call her Martha, some people call her Matty.
Right.
But she's been reported as being in this kitchen, and this seems to be her area here.
Right.
All around this area here. And the main report we've had is that she actually appeared out of the wall.
Oh, right.
Well, if you can imagine this house has not always looked like this because we're nowhere in a museum. But back in the 1970s, this was a living room.
Yeah.
So here was this had long been bricked in. It was a modern fireplace, and there was a young man staying here that night, and it was he who saw her actually, and she just seemed to appear through the wall, dressed in clothes which suggest she comes from about 1780, 1800s. The way she's dressed, she just drifted to the wall, looked at him, and drifted back. And that is one time when someone really was frightened.
Yes.
Because he was, well, you imagine, you're fast asleep.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you wake up. Something's woken you up, you don't know what. And then all of a sudden something just appears out of the wall. I mean,
Yeah, I would think that is quite frightening, to say the least. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Staircase, main staircase here is, of course, has ghosties on it. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, it does. According to what we've been told, there's a little boy on the 6th step up.
Really? Well, let's go and have a look this way. Now, correct me, but we've got a stone staircase here, and of course, as we go upstairs, it becomes a wooden staircase.
That's right.
Now, I have this because they say that there's sounds of children playing on the stairs and children actually being seen on the stairs, but they say only on the stone part.
Only on the stone part.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't explain these things at all, but it is on this part of the stairs that children are heard.
I've got a theory,
Right.
and it's to do with the stone tapes. I think a lot of ghostly sightings are actually recordings from a tragic or traumatic death, and I think that it actually gets recorded into the fabric of the building, and they believe that certain bits of a building, probably stone especially, have certain properties similar to recording tapes. And so in fact, on the anniversary of the death, when the atmosphere is similar or something like that, you actually see it again. But it's very much to do with stone. Look how much stone we've got in this place, of course.
Absolutely.
And here, of course, the stone stairs, and that's where they're seen. But that's only my theory. I don't know.
I've heard other people say this as well and talk about these stone tapes. And I think that you said earlier on that Edward said when he lived here never actually saw anything. And his sister says the same thing. But at that time, this house had never undergone any sort of upheaval.
No.
It was when they moved out, and then this house saw a lot of changes because it was being put back to
renovated,
to
decorated.
today. So there must have been a lot of disturbance there.
And it disturbs the spirits
I think
or the
it might
ghosts.
have
I
done.
agree with you.
I think it might.
Can we have a look upstairs?
Absolutely.
This is an original staircase, I presume, is it?
Apart from this woodwork, which is on the side, but the steps are the original steps.
Yeah. And now we come to the wooden part, of course.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the Great Hall
The Great Hall
is in here.
Yes, and we do have another ghost here actually.
Really?
Yes, I've not
Look
seen
at this
him.
door.
No, I've not seen him. But again, quite a few of our visitors have.
Yeah.
And he's actually sitting there.
On the window
upper
seat.
part, on the window seat. And judging again by the way he's dressed, he seems to come from Tudor times.
Oh, right.
So he must have been a very early visitor to this house, actually.
Yeah.
The house was built in 1530, Tudor times.
Yeah.
But he sits there.
Right.
And,
Now, they've also heard footsteps, apparently, wandering around,
Oh, yes.
padding up and down. And, of course, King Charles I stayed here, I believe, or dined here.
He dined here.
Yeah.
When he was on his way from Cardiff to Brecon,
Yeah.
and he called here.
5th of August, 1645, yeah. Not long before the end of the Civil War.
That's right.
He could have been padding up and down this floor for all we know.
Well, it might well have been him, I don't know.
Probably dined here in this room.
Well, this is where he probably would have
Yeah,
dined,
yeah.
probably, because this is the largest room in the house. So you would have wanted to have
Impressed the king.
So it would have been in the
Yeah.
largest room.
But most of your sightings are up again.
Upstairs.
Shall we
Absolutely.
carry on up?
Yes. Do you want to go this way? Would you like to go this way?
Which is more atmospheric? Bedroom through that way, is it? Or
Yes, there's very little. These chambers here, again, they're active. There's something virtually in every room.
really?
Oh, yes.
Well, let's go through that way, shall we?
Oh, that's a spooky little place in there, before we go any further.
Oh,
That one in there.
shall we go and have a look? You lead on.
Now, this is the steward's room.
Yeah.
And in the wall there, there's a small
A squint.
spy hole, a
Yeah.
squint, that they would have been looking through to make sure that everything was going well.
Yeah.
And through here,
Oh, and a staircase going up there, of course.
yes, these mirror staircases are everywhere in Mankind. There's another one there that leads up into the attic.
Right.
This room now, what a pleasant little room you might think, and it is, it's quite a pretty room.
Yeah.
But again, not without its happenings. And this can be seriously cold in this room, so cold that it's actually like walking into a fridge.
Really?
Here are the stairs that lead up to the attic above.
Can I have a look?
Now, just before we opened,
Yes.
Our manager then was called Val Williams. And she noticed that in the attic there was a weed growing behind the window inside in the attic. So she thought, right, better get that from there. So she goes up these stairs, and at the top it's a doorway like this, but it doesn't even have a half door, it's just got a bar across it. She goes up, and she's got a straight skirt on and heels, balances across the floor because it's just an open floor. She'd had to pull the bar back across the door, balances across the floor, pulls up the weed, comes back, and the bar is back in place.
Oh gosh, and she was the only one around?
She was the only one in the house, actually the only one in the house. And a friend of mine in the early days when we were working here was standing here one day talking to some visitors in the costume that we were in, and she was pushed from behind. She was pushed forcibly into the room. The visitors saw her, saw her fall. We can't explain it. But
unseen hands.
Unseen hands. Yeah.
Top floor?
Top floor.
Right.
Yes.
Another one up there, another staircase going up there. It's full of little nooks and crannies and alcoves and staircases everywhere.
Magic of Llancaster.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Absolutely. This stair descends, goes down into the kitchen.
Yeah. Here, withdrawing room of, I presume, from the Great Hall. Beautifully panelled.
Interest you actually, because on this door is a hex. Look, here's a mark against witchcraft.
Oh, on the door.
Yes, you see there.
Well, I've never seen that before on any.
In old houses where the latches and the hinges often are made of iron.
Yes.
You find these hex marks, and they're marks against witches. This is the cross of Christ.
Yeah. In other words, on the door to stop anything coming through the door.
That's right. And you could find them in windows as well.
Really? Again, to stop them coming in. Right.
So that's something.
And is there a way up through that way, or?
Oh yes.
Oh right. Through the secret panel.
This is a spooky little corner because a figure's been seen here by our visitors. Quite a few visitors have seen it.
Right, standing there.
This door, when we're working in the day, we're obliged to make sure that the cord is across, the rope is across, so that the visitors don't fall down the stairs. And then this door always needs to be on the latch.
Yep.
Otherwise, if it isn't on the latch, it's not going to do it today, is it?
But normally, I'll bet,
it
opens itself.
It swings open.
They're obviously not in today.
No. And there are times when we're in the room and the door is closed, but the latch still goes as if someone is.
As if someone's actually. Oh, I say. And now where?
There are other things that happen in this room. Be warned, beware. Something in this room is attracted to cameras. And people who've been in taking photographs for our brochures, professional photographers. We've had, on 2 separate instances, we've had photographers who felt something cold behind them. And they've sort of moved out of the way, and it's moved with them. And they've moved further, and they've moved further and further. And the one took off and came back over the other side to us. The other one stuck his ground.
Good grief.
And he said he felt as if this sort of took over half his body and was virtually trying to see what he was doing. And when eventually he did come over there, he was absolutely frozen. One side of him was soaking wet, and he was so cold we couldn't believe it.
Are you feeling all right, Steve? Right. Onwards and upwards. Into the bedroom.
Yes.
Now, of course, things were picked up here when we were actually on Most Haunted, and Derek actually picked up someone in the bed, actually dying in the bed. And of course, something that was pointed out to me recently, that the reason the beds were so small in those days is because gentry, especially, who could afford beds like that, slept partly sitting up, because the angel of death passing by at night,
That's right.
if they saw them lying out completely flat, the angel of death would think they were already dead and take them.
You'd breathed your last.
And that's why they used to sleep sitting up in a bed like this one.
Elizabeth I wouldn't go to bed.
That's right. That's correct. She sat on a cushion or a chair. That's right,
And then when she did go to bed and she died, everyone thought, well, there's the proof of the pudding there.
Absolutely right.
But this room is, again, not without its incidents, particularly around this area.
Yeah.
This wardrobe, and we've got a stool against it now, but these wardrobe doors on occasion have just been flung wide open, as if there's someone in there playing some sort of a prank.
I've heard quite a few stories to do with wardrobes for some strange reason, and the doors flying open.
And just...
Yeah.
You honestly would think there's someone in there.
Yeah.
And it's happened to Graham. He's here somewhere. Graham,
Really?
Yes. And it's happened to Graham when he was walking through.
Crikey.
He thought there was someone in the wardrobe as well.
And what's happened to you?
Well, I was actually coming down off these steps.
Yeah. This, of course, is a modern fire escape that's been put in. Yeah.
Yes. And I was actually coming down off the steps when the strings of my apron, it was tugged.
Yeah.
Now, initially, I thought I must have caught it onto something and snagged
Of course you did,
it.
yeah.
But there is nothing there to snag it on, and to be honest, the apron strings are too short to catch on anything. And I'm quite convinced it was pulled.
Someone was actually pulling on your apron strings.
Yanked the string.
Crikey.
And the apron...
Were you alone at the time? Or?
I was, yes. And it was about this time in the afternoon. It was a summer's day.
Did it bother you?
No, it didn't. No. But other people who've been in this room have had strange things happen. Girls with long hair have had their hair pulled. People with anoraks, parkas on.
Yep. The strings
have been pulled. Shoelaces have been
obviously a fetish for
anything. It's like a little child who is...
and it could be a little child, of course, couldn't it?
Well, this is a sort of a thing that a child would do, is to hide and then to sort of jump out and say, "Boo, here I am." But it isn't a frightening thing at all, is it?
No, it's not a frightening house, though, is it?
Not in the main. It can be.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes. It was a bit spooky when I was here at 3 o'clock in the morning, with no lights on.
So if we go straight through this room.
Yeah. Oh, I've forgotten this.
Oh, the rocking cradle.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one.
Now, of course, I know for a fact that things happen in here because that rocking cradle has been seen to actually, on its own, be rocking like that. And people have reported seeing that. I'm right, aren't I?
And recently, quite recently, Suzanne was here with a party of visitors from Japan. And they were in this part of the room when all of a sudden it just started on its own. Just started to rock on its own.
Gosh.
Again, sort of trick that a little boy.
Absolutely. And your ghostly goings on through here? So this is the most haunted room?
This is reputed to be the most haunted room in the house.
Yeah.
But I personally, I usually feel quite happy in
here.
I don't feel anything here. But apparently there's another lady here who is there, and she's quite young. She's got her hair up on top of her head. Is dressed properly. And another thing that happened to both myself and a colleague called Carol Vaughan Williams, who used to work in Llancair in the early days when we opened first of all. A February night, and it was late in the night. We'd been downstairs having a bit of a bank with the staff, and it was 10 o'clock, and there was a nitress on this bed that was a 17th century nitress that I had decided to wash.
Yep.
But I'd forgotten it in the day when I was working here, so in the night I decided to come back up for it.
Yes.
So we left the safety of the downstairs where the lights were on, no lights on at all up here, no lights in the car park, no lights on the road, because as I say, it was the early days. And by the time we got onto this corridor, it was so dark that virtually we were feeling our way along the walls. So we didn't come in this way, we came in this way.
Through the curtain?
Yeah, there wasn't a curtain there then.
I see.
So we came in through this doorway, one hanging onto the other by now.
Yes.
Reached the bed, and as I put down my hand to pick up the nitrous, we were just about to see the outline of the bed. In the darkness, something passed the both of us. We heard the rustle of a taffeta skirt, and there was this coldness and this feeling. We could feel a sort of, not a breeze, but I don't know what you can call it. It was frightening, that was, because we were in the dark and not expecting it.
You didn't see anything,
Didn't
you
see
heard
anything,
it.
but felt it.
And felt it.
I came back the next day to try to reconstruct, because I couldn't believe it.
No, it didn't happen again.
I couldn't reconstruct. I couldn't reconstruct the noise. I couldn't reconstruct any part of it.
So it was a real ghost.
Well, we are convinced, Carol and I. I mean, Carol doesn't work here anymore. But we know what we heard that night.
Exactly.
And other times since, people have reported. Heard this skirt. rustle of this skirt in the room, you know.
Well,
So,
we've reached the top floor. We've reached the end of the journey. And thank you ever so much for your stories.
You're very
That has been
welcome.
amazing. And really and truly, it seems to be a very haunted place.
this is an exceptional house.
You're right. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ghosts and spirits everywhere. But it's a very friendly house, a welcoming house.
That's lovely.
Very well.
Enid, thanks very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Now, we're in Tenby, at the seaside. Most magnificent place. Haven't been here since 1975. Strangely enough, the year that Marion Davis also came to Tenby.
That's right.
And you're here to tell me some ghostly stories because you do ghost walks.
Indeed.
So, anything juicy for us? Anything interesting?
Well, I think probably one of the most common stories, and I find it recurs time and time again, is the story of the corpse candle, which
Right.
is basically an omen of death. And I mean, there are all sorts of omens of death around Wales. There was the Tolaeth, which was the voice of death, or the knocking sound.
Yes.
Cyharaeth, which was a moaning, groaning banshee. The Deryn, of course, was the bird of death, and it could really be any bird, really. But the Canwyll corph, the corpse candle, I think has been seen so many times around here. And one particular story relates to a school teacher who apparently was in lodgings just outside Tenby. And one night she awoke, saw the corpse candle in her room, screamed, brought the whole household running to her aid. And by that time it had disappeared. However, some 6 weeks later, her landlady, who was a strong young woman who was in perfect health originally, she died. And this young woman, who was actually away at the time, was recalled to the farmhouse for the funeral and was taken to pay her respects in what was previously her room,
Yeah.
and laid out in exactly the spot that she had seen that corpse candle, the omen of death.
Oh my goodness. Oh, I say.
Yeah, so that's a very typical story, and there have been so many corpse candle experiences. Also the Fetch funeral,
Right.
which again is an omen of death, and this is where you're going to see perhaps some kind of funeral procession,
Yeah, a ghostly one.
a ghostly funeral procession that would herald a real
Oh, I see.
procession.
So the ghostly one would be seen, and then days later or something like that, would
Something
actually someone would die, and the actual funeral
Yeah.
would then be reenacted, for want of a better word, but in
Yes.
real life.
Yeah, just on the outskirts of Tenby, but sort of between, well, in fact, just outside the village of Penally, there was a very famous one. In 1861, apparently, the vicar of Penally, his serving man, was courting the maid at a local farm, Holloway Farm, and on his way back, very late one evening, he actually witnessed a funeral, a ghostly funeral procession. It was coming towards him closer and closer, and suddenly he realised these were people that he actually knew. He could recognise faces, could make them out amongst the crowd. He realised he was now suddenly directly in their line, and so he pressed against the hedge to try and keep out of their way, but despite that he was apparently kicked and scratched and beaten. And the following morning, when the vicar saw him, he was absolutely staggered. He wanted to know what had happened to him, and so he explained he'd seen this funeral procession, that they'd come towards him. He recognised people, he listed the people, and then he said, to his utter amazement, as they got to the end of to a bend in the road further down, suddenly the procession had gone up through the hedge and taken the direct route down to the churchyard. Now, the man didn't believe him. The vicar just didn't believe him, accused him of drinking, fighting, and punished him. But some weeks later, the tenant of the farm, Holloway Farm, died, and the vicar was called to give comfort to the family. And whilst he was there, he was given a list of funeral arrangements and so on, and was utterly amazed to see that the list comprised exactly of all the
Same people.
this man had related to him previously. The night before the funeral, apparently there was a snowfall, a terrible frost, and so the following day of the funeral, the procession made their way through the lanes, and suddenly they came to the bend in the road, and there the route was obliterated by a bank of snow that had gathered there, so they couldn't really see which way to go, and they took the route up through the hedge and across the field in the direct manner that this man had told
Seen.
his master. And the vicar of Penally said there was absolutely no explanation for it. He just couldn't find any. It simply was, one
supernatural
of the best
experience
of a fetch or phantom funeral.
Amazing. That's a good one. Now, we've got more stories, of course. Up to Castle Hill next?
Yep.
Okay, shall we go?
Yep.
You lead on, because I don't know the way. So, Marion, we're actually now on Castle Hill.
Yep.
All that's left, basically, is that piece of castle up there.
Well, there is a gatehouse further down the hill, and there are little bits of wall, but on the top of the Castle Hill, that's the main
bit.
thing, really.
Yeah. Now, behind us here is St Catherine's Island.
Yep.
That it looks so much like Alcatraz, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's not a prison, is it, up there?
No, it was a fort. It was part of the defences of this area, particularly in view of the fact we had Milford Haven and Pembroke Dock, which were naval dockyards. So this was built in anticipation of an attack that may occur by the French, really, and Napoleon III. It's at the same time as this was being built, things like the Martello Towers and so on around the coast, and other defences.
Now we have, of course, a ghostly story to do with the island and the area around here, of course.
Well, apparently sometime around the mid-16th century, the people of Tenby were really very shocked and surprised one stormy night to see a ghostly vessel travelling across Carmarthen Bay here. Now, it was being tossed and turned in apparently most ferocious ways. It was absolutely appalling weather, and they could see ghostly figures and sort of firelights, they said, on the deck of the boat, but were absolutely terrified by ghostly wailing noises and so on. So rushed back to their houses and waited, really.
Lock the doors.
Yes, lock the doors, exactly. But the following morning they came back down to the castle beach here, expecting to see masses of wreckage up and down, but there was nothing to be seen except the body of a young man who was just lying here on the beach. Now, apparently he was dressed in strange clothing. It seemed that he was, I think he looked dead, but in fact he was asleep. And was actually woken by the birds overhead, they say. Of course, the people of Tenby rushed down to offer him food and water, invited him back to their houses, but he refused to come into Tenby and instead preferred to go and live here on St Catherine's Island. Now, apparently he was there for quite some long time and was a very familiar figure that would be seen around about the rocks there. Prior to the fort being up on the island there was apparently a little chapel to St Catherine, and I can't exactly tell you how old it is, or it might have been. It was demolished to make way for the fort, but perhaps he did take shelter there. I wouldn't really like to say. But a shepherd that worked his flocks around the cliffs here took pity on the man, and because winter was approaching decided he'd go over and invite him to come back and stay with his family. So went over to the island, again took food and water, and he found the man sitting on a rock at the back of the island looking out to sea. Now, the man again refused to come into Tenby, he just wouldn't come in, but it was at that time he began to tell his tale. Now, he said he was a pirate chief, and he said that during his career he'd committed terrible atrocities, him and his crew, that all the crew had been lost in a storm and that his boat had been manned by ghosts and spirits. He said that he had killed the one that loved him best in a violent fit of temper. He'd killed her. But he said since that time, sea maidens had come to him at night here on the island and told him that she had forgiven him and that she was now at rest. Now, during the course of relating this story, suddenly he leapt up, pointed to some waves that were rolling on towards the island, and said to this shepherd, look, there she is, upon the billow's crest, upon the wave. And with that, he threw himself into the water here, just below the island, and was drowned. Now, as I say, today's a lovely day here. The sea is calm.
Very tranquil.
I can tell you, in the winter, it is wild. Horrendous waves, really very dangerous, just around the island, and there was nothing that could be done.
No chance to get him out.
No, and since then, no sightings have been made of him, but the people of Tenby, it said, those that became acquainted then with his story through the shepherd, hoped that he'd found his rest at last, that he was at peace. with himself after all the terrible crimes he'd committed. Now, I will tell you that, in fact, this area was very much troubled by the activities of the Barbary Corsairs, who were pirates who came from North Africa, and it may well be the case that this was actually a Barbary Corsair that
Gosh, yes.
Was down on his luck in a most desperate way.
Wow. Hence the fact they mentioned strange clothes, of course.
Yes, I think that's right.
That is fantastic. Now tell me, we're here talking to you because you actually do the Tenby Ghost Walks.
That's right.
All year round, or?
Well, they are available all year round, but it's in the summer really that I'm on a regular timetable of 6 days a week.
Oh my gosh.
And I leave up in town by the Lifeboat Tavern, leave at 8 o'clock, 6 nights of the week, and the walk takes an hour and a half.
So anybody wants to come on a ghostly tour of Tenby, come and see you.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
To see them.
That is wonderful. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hello, my name's Richard Felix, and I'm here at my base at the Old County Jail in the centre of Derby. This place over the last 150 years has been a place of terror, torment, and of course death. And that's one of the reasons why this place is as haunted as it is. I've chosen Derby as the catalyst for the national ghost tour of Great Britain. Over the last 10 years, I have taken in excess of 95,000 people on a ghost tour somewhere around the Midlands. And of course, have spoken to many of those people on the tours, and of course have realised just how fascinated people are by ghosts. This is the reason that we have chosen to do this tour. The video that you've just watched is a part of that series, but I want your help. If you have a ghost story, then please either email me or write to me at the address that you'll see at the end of this video. Of course, you must remember that after speaking to so many people, I think I have an ability to be able to see through some of the stories, to be able to differentiate between a story that is true or a story that's made up. And of course, you must remember that 8 out of 10 ghost stories can be explained, but it's the other 2 that you've got to worry about. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Do sleep well and don't have nightmares.